we're getting straight to the heart of the matter, which is, how are you? Are you coping? Is your family healthy? Do you feel safe? Can I help?
Power to Live More with Joe Dodds.
Welcome to the Power to Live More podcast, all about productivity, organisation, well-being, energy and resilience. I'm Jo Dodds, and I started this show to enable interesting people to share their stories about how they use their power to live more, and by that I mean to do the stuff that they want to do more than the stuff that they need to or should do. It's about creating a life for yourself where you have the energy, health and space to be happy and fulfilled, spending your time as you'd like, whether that be at work, home or somewhere else entirely. That's your choice.
Hello, my name is Ellie Dodds and I am co-presenter, and today Jo's interviewing Amanda Davie. Amanda and Jo met originally through the Engaged Success movement and connected at the time through a mutual interest in social media and organisations. Executive coach and co-founder of Equal Talent and She Is No Limits. Amanda helps individuals and leaders to lift their limits, realise their peak performance and create inclusive teams and cultures. Back to the studio.
Today I'm interviewing Amanda Davie of Equal Talent. Welcome, Amanda. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Jo.
We were just doing a bit of reminiscing about when we first met, weren't we? Like ages ago, years ago, and we couldn't quite remember, but we think we might have got there in the end. So start by telling us a bit about who you are, what you do, and crucially, where you do it.
Okay. So I am an executive and leadership coach. I am co-founder of Equal Talent, and we work with leaders and organisations to help build more balanced, inclusive and high-performing teams and cultures. And as coaches, we have a particular preference or flavour for group coaching work, which is the newer kid on the block, if you like, of coaching in comparison to team coaching and one-to-one coaching. And we tend to apply it to help organisations to galvanise underrepresented or disparate groups or groups of individuals who may be feeling like they are the only. So we use that intervention to build camaraderie, to help individuals to work together to create their own sense of inclusion and belonging.
Mm-hmm. And where are you based?
I am based in London. My business partner's based in the northwest of England, so we try to cover off those two regions in terms of our individual sales and marketing efforts. But of course, now that the world is flat and virtual, we work with clients who are everywhere.
Yes, it does. As I sort of finish off by going, and crucially, where you are, that's a question I've always asked. But obviously, mostly the answer now is in my.
Yes.
A lot of it was, people working from home originally, but yes, it suddenly became a question that was quite the same answer for most people. So, what I found interesting in your introduction is that what you offer is very specific for very specific audiences, which is not always the case, and feels like it's been sort of in development, presumably. I mean, I don't suppose wake up one day and go, these are the people I'm going to help. And I also know that you've had a quite different background, because when we connected initially, it was through sort of different stuff to what you're doing now. So tell us a bit about your journey, what you wanted to do right from the beginning, and the sorts of things that you've done in the meantime, and then how you got to this quite specific target for, target market or whatever, or, group of people that you help. Because, as I say, not everyone does that. Some people just go, I'm an executive coach and that's it. Not what you said.
Yeah. Gosh, right from the beginning. Well, right from the beginning, I wanted to be an air hostess.
So did I.
Did you? I think it was quite common in our generation.
Yeah.
If you'll allow me to suggest we're of a similar age, Jo. because it was seemed as quite glamorous, and the EU was opening up, and everyone said to me, oh, you're really good at languages, you should do languages, then you can travel the world. And so I had this kind of perception that it was really glamorous and adventurous, and I could use my languages. And then my mother, who's always been very good at keeping me quite realistic, said, well, if you want to clean up other people's sick for a living, then go for it. So
my dad did that role for me. He travelled a lot on planes at that time, and he said if you want to go and be a waitress in the sky, help yourself.
Yes.
not to do down the air hostesses who or the air stewards who do a grand job and have lots of challenges over and above the ones that we've just shared. But like you, it did put me off.
So I studied languages at uni, and then I came to London in search of a job. It was the early 90s or mid 90s. We were in a recession. And so it was a case of trying to find something ideally where I could use my languages. But I was told by recruiters that I didn't stand a chance in hell, because in London, if you wanted a native speaking French or Spanish person, they were a dime a dozen. So that was an education well spent. And I bet I got really lucky that I fell into this exciting new glamorous industry that was opening up at the time, which was the internet and digital media. So I followed my nose in terms of customer services roles. I've always been a good communicator. I'd always worked in pubs and restaurants, and I knew how to deal with customers. So I ended up going into a online advertising sales house doing client services. And from there, I continued to work for digital media startups, predominantly on the agency side. So honing my craft as a client servicer, an accounts person, dealing with clients, but also always part of the co-founding team. So I learnt how to build businesses from a very young age, and businesses that were hugely successful, working with really talented pioneering entrepreneurs who were real risk takers, and boy, did it pay off for a lot of them in those early days.
Yeah.
I rode the roller coaster and the wave of the dot-com boom. Then we had dot-com bust, and so we all learned how to manage redundancy. But I did that for 16 years. The latter part of it was I ended up setting up my own business, which was always the template that had been role modelled for me, which was a huge learning curve. Not just in terms of learning all the business skills, but actually starting to learn a lot about who I am and why I am who I am as a leader, when you are given that ultimate responsibility of people's livelihoods.
Mm-hmm. So then you moved into coaching. I'm sure it wasn't quite as quick and easy as that. I made that sound. How did that come about? I mean, we're sort of in the era of people having sort of a series of careers now compared to how things were in the past, and I guess it'll accelerate even further now, and our younger people will do 10 different things by the time they've finished, but I guess we're both doing what as you say, our generation have tended to do certainly in the entrepreneurial world.
Yes, I decided that I had enough. And so when I talk about it, I talk about that being my first career and coaching being my second career. And for me currently, and it might change over time, I'm still putting distance between my first and my second career for a number of reasons. I hit the glass ceiling. I found that very difficult, being a feminist, and certainly in my mid-30s when I started to brush up against that glass ceiling, realizing just how much of a feminist I was, when you only really start to pay attention when you're faced with that challenge and that struggle. I recognised that I needed a new challenge as well. I was quite bored. I'd been flogging the same stuff for 16 years. And also we were trying to have a family. That wasn't an easy journey for us. We were dealing with infertility for several years before we finally got the medical intervention that we needed to have the children. And so I needed to create a new career for myself, one that I could integrate with my new family when they finally came along.
So why coaching? What were the sort of aspects of that fit with those sorts of needs?
So I had always been most passionate about talent. So I'd never worked in HR, but people's development and the nurturing of the people in my teams was always the most important and the most interesting part of what I did. I think, ultimately, and the coaching journey has really sort of helped me to understand why I do what I do, because of who I am. And my core value's always been friendship, helping others, connection, building community. So I wanted to take my people management, my leadership development skills in a direction that meant that I could help others to become the best versions of themselves in the workplace. And I always was very clear that I wanted to stay working in the workplace, because I think because of my entrepreneurial background that I'd always got such a buzz out of seeing people grow and flourish in a work environment.
Mm-hmm. And at the beginning of this part about your sort of history, I asked 25 million and one questions all in one go. And the beginning one was the fact that you have honed what you're doing and offering to a certain sort of type of individual or sort of group within an organisation. How did that come about?
So as I expanded my coaching training repertoire, so I first trained as in one-to-one coaching, and then I got interested in team coaching, went off and did a wonderful course with Barefoot, and then I came across group coaching, and for me I just thought that was a really interesting intervention because of its potential to bring different people together and help them to bind and connect and build strength in that collective. And I've always been a team player. I've always thrived best in teams and in communal group environments. And I think, again, we as coaches, we learn so much about why we are who we are. I'd got good relationship skills. I'd got high levels of empathy, compassion, helping others had always been really important. But fairness and relatedness were the two kind of main drivers for me. I wanted to use my skills to say to people in the workplace, look, you're not the only one. There's a woman over there in that team who's struggling. Let's get together. Let's think together, work together, and see if we can support each other moving forward. So and also, without wanting to go too deep in the short space that we have, a short amount of time that we have together, my need for belonging has always been very high, and that's as a result of some family dysfunction and family trauma that I experienced in my formative years, and so I have always gone looking for that sense of belonging, and I've always found it. The entrepreneurial.com years, those businesses were successes in part because they created that family environment. We were all in it together. And so I want to create create interventions and environments for my clients to know that there are people like them and unlike them, but that they have a shared, goal or shared mission or shared challenges, and that there are people that have got their backs and that will go on that journey with them.
And did that then feed into working with somebody else? Because quite often people in our sort of businesses, they're either, absolutely totally on their own, or they do sort of connect up with somebody else, and it's a sort of a duo, if you like. Was that a very specific decision in keeping with that belonging and the team working that you like?
Yes, and also because I am a high extrovert, so I don't fare very well when I am left on my own or without not just people around me and being with people, but also a variety of people. And I recognized that in myself quite quickly once I set up as a coach and I was trading as a coach. I didn't have too much of a problem finding clients and bringing in some money, but very quickly I realized that something was missing. It demotivated me to be doing it just for myself. I needed that kind of feeling of building something together. And I got very lucky. I met Catherine, my now business partner, through my group coaching training journey. She at the time was co-running a coach membership organisation called the Bird Table, who took coaches from across the UK, and indeed we had some international members, and taught them a very specific group coaching training model in order that they could set up groups in their local areas, or bird tables as they called them, for SME and self-employed business women. And it hasn't always just been the two of us by any means. We did trial a couple of other coaches. So at one point we were looking to become a foursome as a team running the business. And I'm so grateful for the fact that we were all coaches trying that model out, because we were all self-aware enough to recognize what worked, what didn't, and inevitably, whether it's different life stages or challenges in terms of dynamics within the team, Catherine and I ended up keeping going, and we have other people in the team with us who work on a part-time contract basis, so very flexible. But again, it's I think for Catherine, she's similar to me in the respect that we have ambitions to build the team out and to create opportunities for others to join us on this wonderful learning curve that we're on.
It's really lovely to hear how much of what you've done and decided has come from that whole self-awareness stuff that I guess you're teaching your clients. I mean, I guess many coaches do that, but by no means is it everybody that you speak to, that's got so clear about who they are and what they need, and then shaped their business accordingly. I think sometimes people fall into what's offered to them, what people are prepared to pay them for, and it isn't necessarily shaped around who they are, what they want to do, and how they want to do it. So it's so refreshing to hear that's how you got to where you've got to.
Thank you.
And how does it work working with somebody else? And I'm saying that because I don't, and I wouldn't. And it always intrigues me when I interview people who are working in partnerships, to think about the sort of the logistics of who's responsible for what, and how often do you need to speak to each other, and do you use technology to keep in touch, and all that sort of stuff. How does it work?
So well, since COVID, we've seen very little of each other in person. But typically, and we hope to get back to this, what the way we would organise our calendars, if you like, is that we would come together in person for a couple of days every quarter to do all the business planning work, but also to dedicate some time to our own CPD. And so in the early days, we used that CPD time to work out our strengths as a team, our weaknesses. And so we were sort of working, always had a very keen focus on who was best doing what, in order that they could play to their strengths. So as that has evolved, it's just meant that we've been able to be really honest with each other when we're not doing things that don't serve us particularly well. So and we bring a lot of humour to that. So Catherine and Faye's our ops director, they'll always say on a Zoom team call, right, Amanda, you can leave the call now because we're going to talk about the detail and you'll just switch off. So there's just no point. So but Catherine and I recognise, I think quite early on, that we both, aside from our coaching skills, both better off front of house, if you like, so sales and marketing, client relationship management. What we realised we were far less good at was some of the operational stuff, so processes, platforms, technology. We can use that stuff, and we like people to tell us what to do or what to use. So Faye, when she joined us a couple of years ago, fulfilled that role brilliantly.
It's interesting coming from your tech background.
Yes, I know.
That's probably a good thing, though. If you don't want to sort of dabble, you want to stay out of it, it's probably better than trying to do it all, or sort of jumping in to the bits that you're interested in, which gets in the way of everyone else doing what they're supposed to do.
Yeah. And I never at any stage in my digital career was I the tech person. I could talk to clients about the tech and sell the bells and whistles, but I always had very clever technical specialists delivering the work, and I was able to pull them into client meetings when clients wanted to get into the detail. I like a gadget, but for me I want to be with the people, having the people conversations.
You're the sort of so that person. So yes. That happens so that this can happen, and that's the bit you're interested in. So how do you sort of work? What's your day look like? And I guess it's probably different pre and post COVID and currently, but how do you get done what you need to get done, and what sort of things do you use for that yourself, whether it's tools or apps or pen and paper, which is what most of my guests tell me.
Yeah, well, I do like a list. I've always got a notebook, and working from home currently, I carry it around the house. It's often in my hand. More often in my hand is my phone, because that's got my diary, and I lean very heavily into my online calendar to tell me what to do. So I guess how I prioritize my time, it's clients first, so all the scheduled coaching work is in there first, because the money's got to come in as a business, and that's the work that I like doing the most. And then I will plan other stuff around it, whether that's proposals that I have to write, or internal meetings that we need to have scheduled, and I put the tasks that I need to do into my diary. So because I've got young children who are currently at home.
How young? How old are
they? 7 and 8.
Oh, just at that age. So they do need supervision. They do need homeschooling.
You leave them alone for 30 seconds and they've got the PlayStation out, and it's
I feel for you.
They have to be monitored.
Yeah.
So I put everything in my diary, and my husband and I will sit down on a Sunday evening and compare diaries for the week ahead and divvy out the homeschooling based on who's got what work when, and then we often at the moment have to sort of just do another quick sense check every evening when the kids are in bed, just to make sure we've got all the essentials covered off.
Yeah. How do you think this situation will sort of influence and change what things are like in the future? So, you know, the fact that you're having to fit homeschooling in around other stuff, do you think that will have benefits when that goes away and you've suddenly got this extra time?
I love this question, because as much as I will bring my optimism and hope for what I want for the future, I also acknowledge that we are creatures of habit, and for those people that want to go back to what we had or what they had, they'll do that. So I guess optimistically, I'd love to think of both mums and dads wanting to and being able to work more flexibly, work from home, be able to share 50-50 the school run, etc. We do a lot of parental leave coaching, and the organisations that call it parental leave are being optimistic because the people that sign up for it are female mums, and you know, one day we'll have some men in the programme and that will be wonderful, but for now, you know, I spend my days listening to how put upon women are, and also, you know, we are our own worst enemies. I'm reading a book at the moment. You one of your questions, Jo, was you know, what podcasts and books are you reading? And I actually sort of made a mental note to mention this one because it's brilliant. It's called Burnout, and it's by Emily and Amelia Nagoski. They are twin sisters, and they talk about human giver syndrome. So many of us on this planet are takers and many of us are givers, human givers, and most of the human givers are female, and we feed the patriarchy because we continue to believe the scripts that we must be good, calm, quiet, beautiful, homemaking, caring. We must be the experts when it comes to raising our kids. And so, you know, when a keen, plucky new dad will say, well, I can change that nappy or I can take the baby for a few hours, we say, no, I must do that. That's my job. And so we've got to help mums and dads to realise from when their babies are very young, that just because the female gave birth, it doesn't mean that the male can't contribute at least 50% of the practical work.
Because it's not even just that the women often will say, no, that's my job. Sometimes the men will do it, and then it will be a well done, that's really good, you know, that you babysat the children, rather than that's just your job, you're their dad.
Yes, thank you. I used to say thank you to my husband a lot when he helped out, and again, not helpful because he hears that he's doing me a favour rather than just doing his job.
Yes, yeah. It's interesting just thinking back to how things were here. I have a 14-year-old, and I think in some ways we had a benefit for the fact that I was running my own business on my own whenever we were making decisions about things, you know, whether that be her being ill and somebody needing to be with her or whatever, because we weren't competing like for like. We weren't sort of my job's more important than yours, therefore you have to sort of take the childcare on today. A lot of the time my working on my own meant there was no one else to do the thing I had to do. So if I'd committed to a meeting, I had to do it. Whereas because Simon works in a corporate situation with a team, you know, there was probably somebody else that could help out or whatever. So in some ways, having completely different sort of jobs and roles and so on probably helped us as we were navigating all of that. Whereas I think if you've sort of got similar sorts of experiences and demands, you probably vie much more or not. And as you say, the women perhaps take more on. in that situation.
Yeah.
So you have started a new business recently called She Has No Limits, and I think that now might be a good time to talk about that, as we've sort of got a bit onto the female discussion. Tell us a bit more about that, what it is and how it came about.
So yes, I mentioned that Catherine and I, our roots are coming together was as a result of coaching women. So it's always been a big part of what we've done, albeit that we run programs for other underrepresented minorities in organisations. I think where the trajectory is at with diversity and inclusion at the moment is that women, the challenge of trying to bring about more gender equality in organisations is getting more share of voice than some other minorities, rightly or wrongly. But hopefully, if we can make enough gains with gender equality, then the other battles will follow and will be less hard to fight. So we've always done lots of women's coaching, and then of course COVID hit in March of 2020. We all went into lockdown, and very quickly we were hearing the desperation of our female clients coming through loud and clear. I would be saying, if I had a fiver for every time a client said to me that their husband has commandeered the spare room, locked himself in there from 9 till 6, he pops down to eat his lunch and ruffles the kids' hair, and the mother is left with her work, her career on the kitchen table with the kids, with the homeschooling, with the cooking, cleaning, and I couldn't believe it. We couldn't believe what we were hearing. We as feminists have all been working really hard in our own way for decades now. And I think COVID-19 has really exposed the very deeply entrenched inequalities in our society. So as much as there will hopefully be some gains for gender equality, certainly around flexible working, and I know lots of dads have really valued the extra time with their kids, lots, not all. But, the women last year were saying to us loud and clear, help.
Yeah.
And so we were struggling as an all-female run business as well. We were all mums of school-age kids, and also our work had all but dried up. All the corporate work had pretty much dried up, because the first budget line to go when there's a fear of recession is training and coaching budgets. So we had some extra time, and we needed to do something. We needed to do something to save our business, and we needed to do something in response to the plight of women that we serve. So we decided to get together with a couple of other organisations that we knew who also served working women, and we said, right, let's put on a day. We'll run a conference. We'll offer live coaching, free coaching, or highly discounted. We'll put panels on with inspirational business leaders, telling us how we can bounce back, what the future of work needs to look like now, so that women can not just get back on track, but come back and start to really thrive in their careers. So let's use COVID and 2020 as a springboard to help as many women as we can in their careers. And of course the stats were coming out by the summer that the number of redundancies, majority were female, furloughing, majority female, and it was just something had to be done. So we did what we could, and we launched She Has No Limits with a conference in September, and over the period of from sort of June through to the end of the year, we were also running pro bono group coaching sessions on Zoom, so women could come each month. We were having up to 50, 60 women coming, and we would have a different topic. So resilience, managing anxiety, goal setting, etc. Just to give them the opportunity to come together and know that they're not alone, to work together, especially those who were self-employed and feeling particularly lonely, but also keeping them focused on their own professional development and growth. And the message has been with She Has No Limits. You could be waiting a long time for your employer to start to invest in your growth and professional development again, because they're trying to stop the businesses from hemorrhaging. So why don't we all take responsibility for this and do it together? It doesn't need to cost much to spend a bit of time each month on your own CPD, your own continual professional development.
That sounds really, really helpful for people. Do you think when you've got very senior people who are women and maybe who are parents, that helps or not? Because there's what's that thing? It's Queen Bee syndrome, isn't it? Where often having the really senior women actually doesn't help in terms of bringing other people through and the whole equality thing. In some cases, because of the whole, well, I've done it, so you have to too type thing as well. But yeah, do you see that's helping in organisations where they do have that, or are they trying to compensate and become different because they have to compete with the men?
I think we're starting to see less of it. I think for a couple of decades at least, we saw a lot of women who perceived that the way in which they could become successful in their organisation was to behave like the men, to join that club. And even heard of examples of women learning to play golf, for example, so they can go off and play golf with the men. And that's their choice, that's their approach, and that worked for them. But I think Maggie Thatcher was the classic Queen Bee, wasn't she? That on the surface of it, she was all about feminism, and certainly me growing up when she was Prime Minister, it was a clear signal to me that I could achieve anything in my career. But she didn't have any women in her government. So, when I hit the glass ceiling, it was because I had a female boss who loved the boys and kept the women in their place. And so I'm heartened. There are lots of there's lots of scientific and psychological research-based evidence these days that there is power in the sisterhood. When you bring women together as a collective, powerful things happen. And women are feeling that and experiencing that more, whether that is in teams that they've cultivated themselves, or employee engagement groups in their organisations, or coming to third-party organisations or programmes like She Has No Limits. So we know that the model works, that we can travel further together than we can individually. I have a very dear friend and kick-ass business leader friend, Mary, and she says when she goes on platforms for women's events that those women, those queen bees will burn in hell. So I think there is increasingly less place for them to hide, and I think also they realize they don't have to be a man anymore. To achieve success.
I don't know if you've come across Dr. Murray Macleod, but she might be worth connecting up with for anyone interested in this sort of thing. Her background, she was an evolutionary behavioural biologist, so she studied animals and then turned to women as the sort of example of that. And she's all about the science of success for women. So
brilliant.
Listening, but also yourself, if you need an intro, then I interviewed her a few years ago, so she might be worth getting in contact with.
Thank you. Can I give you one right back at you?
Yes, please.
So one of my favourite books that I read last year. Well, okay, I'll take a step back. I've developed a girl crush for two lesbian wives in the last year. So I read, first of all, I came across the work of Glennon Doyle through Brené Brown. I'm a big Brené Brown fan, so anything Brené does, I consume. She interviewed Glennon Doyle about her book Untamed, which is this idea of living the life that you want to live completely untamed. And Glennon has a very powerful and emotional story of how she left her husband when she fell in love with Abby Womback. And Abby Womback is an Olympian international soccer player. She's retired now. She was the captain of that very successful USA soccer Olympic team. And so I've come to know both of their work now. Abby does a lot of work around women's leadership. She's still a soccer coach, and she's written a book called Wolfpack, which is very short, very easy to read, and it's based on her learnings of becoming the captain of the USA women's soccer team. And it's got half a dozen lessons in it. Each one is a chapter, and it's all about, the power of the female team when they come together. What wonderful things can happen.
Yes, yeah, lovely. Thank you. Always love new resources, and especially books. So you mentioned in the middle that you'd sort of thought about books to recommend, and that was one of them. Were there any others on your list of podcasts or books or anything that you wanted to share before we move on? I don't want to not give you that opportunity.
Oh, thank you. The only other one I wanted to mention, because I think it's really pertinent to this distributed working model that we all find ourselves in, and also the pandemic. The pandemic has exacerbated one of the biggest diseases that we face as a society, which is loneliness. And another book that I read last year was Together by Dr. Vivek Murthy, and he was the US Surgeon General under President Obama. And he sort of made it part of his legacy, if you like, that we shine a light on loneliness as Western societies. And it's wonderfully uplifting. It's got lots of great anecdotes in it. It's very accessible, but all science and kind of medicine based in terms of what loneliness is, how we come to suffer from loneliness, and how togetherness and connection are the antidote to it.
Oh, that sounds really interesting. It's interesting. I was talking to somebody the other day about the whole sort of pandemic time and all the sort of online calls that we've had and all that sort of thing. And he was reflecting on Christmas this year, and he was saying how he's actually connected far more often and for longer with more members of his family than he would ever have done any other time. And it was really interesting, when a lot of our sort of narrative is about people being lonely, which many people are at this time. And as you said, being an extrovert, however good things are in the situation you're in, you need people to give you that energy, don't you? We're very fortunate in this household. We're all introverts, so locking ourselves in the house hasn't been the end of the world for us so far, anyway. But it was interesting that he was actually saying, I don't think we'll ever do anything quite like that again, because hopefully we won't need to. But actually, it was much more than they would normally have done, which I thought was interesting as well. So one of the things I find interesting with the sort of lockdown scenario is all the different perspectives and nuances there are to the situation that we find ourselves in, because of how different we all are and how different our situations are as well. And that's sort of, I suppose, should go without saying, because that's what these things are about. But it is interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, and the context, the subject matter. So, he was able to reconnect with family members, and a lot of the conversation that we're having, whether that's with family or friends or, people we meet in our work, is, we're getting straight to the heart of the matter, which is, how are you? Are you coping? Is your family healthy? Do you feel safe? Can I help? And, these are open-ended coaching questions, if you like, that that build trust and connection. So again, back to our earlier part of the conversation, one of my hopes for the future post-COVID is that we have learnt the art of connection, or relearnt that art, and that we can carry that forwards to enhance our professional and our personal relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. So last couple of questions. Firstly, what about those days where it goes horribly wrong? How do you deal with
those? I try not to beat myself up.
Mm-hmm.
Emphasis on the word try there. I'm very good at beating myself up. Self-compassion and self-care is always my biggest kind of piece of work. Try and learn from what's just happened, or what the mistakes, or what's not happened. Try to set it aside. I am working on my meditation practice at the moment. So I trained in Vedic meditation 3 years ago, but I've been more off the wagon, as they say, than on. But with being at home and not rushing around, from business meeting to business meeting, I've had more opportunity to be still and to meditate. And I find that hugely cathartic, especially on those days when things go wrong.
Mm-hmm. They say, don't they, if you haven't got 10 minutes to meditate, you should spend 20 minutes doing it or something. I know there's some sort. I'm never any good at making quotes sound as good as they did the first time.
Yeah, no, I've got I trained with London Meditation Centre, who are absolutely wonderful, run by a husband and wife team, Gillian and Michael, who are two very inspiring individuals. And they say, you've always got something else better to do than to meditate, but you've rarely got anything that is more valuable to do.
See, there's always a better quote coming along. Yeah, no, that's really good. Thank you. And the last question then. So on those days where you get to live more, and that's where I say that you get to do more of the things that you want to do and less of the stuff that you don't want to do, what do those days look like for you?
Oh, if it's been a good day for me, I have had a deep connection with somebody I've never met before. That kind of, wow. Sometimes the universe just gives you what you need. Or I've brought people together and I've seen that spark, or what I hypothesized would be a useful connection I came to be. That person, you need to speak to that person because they can help you with that. If I've overcome something hard, and just help the client to get closer to happiness, closer to realizing their potential, I still get a huge amount of reward out of my coaching conversations.
Lovely. Thank you, Amanda. It's been so interesting talking to you. I think we've covered a load of different topics today, which has been great. Tell people how they can find out more about you and get in contact.
Thank you, Jo. Well, if you are a professional woman and you feel like you need a little bit more support, rigor, people to work with on your professional development and your growth, then come to shehasnolimits.com, www.shehasnolimits.com, and see what we have to offer. We have a free community, and then we have a whole range of different events that you can either pay as you go or pay the membership. So come and see if we can help. If you are a leader of an organisation and you want to explore whether group coaching can help you to help with your behavioural gap, we call it. So the difference between the policy around diversity, equity, inclusion and belonging, and actually the transformational behavioural change, the unlearning all those deeply entrenched and unhelpful behaviours and teaching your people the behaviours of inclusivity, then go to equaltalent.com, www.equaltalent.com. Thank you, Jo.
Lovely. Thanks, Amanda. Are you a home-based coach or consultant feeling like you need a bit of help? Our Power to Live More Calm membership is designed to meet you where you're at with the help you need in the moment so you can get unstuck, move forwards and get stuff done. You might think this sounds too good to be true, or maybe wondering how it would fit with how you work and run your business. Why not have a no obligation chat with me to see how I can help you? All you need to do is go to powertolivemore.com/calm call. All this information is available in the show notes. If you go to powertolivemore.com / in this case 208, then you'll find them there. And this week I want to continue the theme on habits. Last week I talked about taking small daily actions to compound into something much bigger. And at the Gold Calm Call this week, we talked about the concept of habit stacking, which you may have come across, particularly if you've read the book Atomic Habits by James Clear, or maybe The Power of Habits by Charles Duhigg. The concept of habit stacking is putting two or more habits together so that they naturally follow in line. And so the second habit is triggered by the first habit and the third is triggered by the second, and so on. When you use this concept, it can really help you to keep you going with those things and really turn them into solid habits. So I've talked many times about the fact that I like to have a cup of coffee in the late morning, maybe about 11 o'clock, and I want to read business articles and business books. And so I've connected those two things. So I've stacked those two habits. So my habit of drinking coffee, perhaps even sitting outside now, it's getting sunny, and reading my business book or my business article at the same time. And so it creates for me a sort of ritual where one thing, the coffee, leads to the other, the reading. We were talking about the Gold Calm Call about actually something as mundane as brushing your teeth and flossing your teeth. One of my members is a former dentist, so she was keen to remind us about the concept of flossing. And we were saying that, you can build those habits. So we talked about the concept of brushing your teeth every night, but also flossing your teeth every night. I guess the flossing bit comes first, and that then triggers the teeth brushing. And I was saying that I have a sort of face regime at night after I brush my teeth, and I've realised and noticed recently that more often than not I do follow that routine, and I do clean my face and do what I want to do, put my moisturiser on, all that sort of stuff, because I've brushed my teeth, and then I feel obliged to do the next step, even though sometimes I really can't be bothered and it's really late at night and I consider giving it a miss. But it's amazing how powerful that trigger is of the first element of those stacked habits to trigger the second of the habits and the third of the habits. And so more often than not it happens because of that sort of shape, if you like, of those stacked habits. So what habits are you trying to develop and practice, and what other habits can you stack those onto so that you're more likely to do them more quickly because you've got a process, a routine that encourages you to take that next step. So think of that habit that you want to develop, and then find another habit that you are already doing and see how you can tack those two together to encourage you to pick up and run with that second habit that you're trying to develop. Let me know how you get on. Again, the show notes are at powertolivemore.com/208, and we look forward to speaking to you next week.
Use your power to live more.